Welcome to Red and Yellow, the podcast about all things to do with refereeing at grassroots level, looking at the laws of football, speaking to guests, and trying to help you become a better referee, with Adam Humphreys and me, Ed Connell.
Hello, it's Adam here, and welcome to this episode of Red or Yellow. I just wanted to jump on here before the episode started and remind you to send us your questions about anything refereeing, and that way we can hopefully help you improve your game, as well as help all of the listeners improve their games as well. The best place to send us your question is via our loyal listener WhatsApp community, which you can join by clicking the link in the show notes, or send us an email or find us on social media. It's at Red or Yellow Pod. Added to that, please subscribe to the podcast, and that way our meandering chats about refereeing will magically appear on your phone whenever we release a new episode. And lastly, all views expressed on this podcast are that of myself, Adam Humphreys, and not that of Football Queensland. Now that's all done, let's get on with the show. Hello, Ed.
Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you very much.
Today I'm not coming from I am coming from the Antipodean part of the world, but I'm not coming from our Toowoomba headquarters. I am coming from our Toowoomba headquarters because I'm in the middle of Toowoomba. I'm not at my studio at home.
Studio darling.
Studio darling. Global headquarters here.
I thought you said it was the back room that you called it to me earlier on.
Excuse me, don't give away my trade secrets. It's all about marketing, Edward. How's the London headquarters? I can still see you've got your exercise bike behind you.
Yeah, the Peloton's still there. Yeah, all good. Yeah, nothing to complain about. Starting to get into autumn here, which is not too pleasant. But otherwise all good. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear, mate. That's really good to hear. And also, I think it's probably worth telling everybody once again, well, it's been a week or two since we recorded, because guess what, everyone? Ed was on holiday again.
Well, I think to put it more accurately, I was out of the country on non-work related activities.
Okay, right. So we're now using semantics, are we, to describe Ed's travels?
I was out of the country, but sadly, it wasn't quite as exciting as sad. My mum's not very well, and so my siblings and I decided to take my parents away for a few days to try and sort of, personally cheer them both up and to give my dad a bit of respite. So it wasn't quite as calm and relaxing as one might expect, but it was lovely. We were in Mallorca, and the reason why I went there is because my family has long associations with that island because of the Love Island program.
Because of Love Island?
Yeah, my brother-in-law created Love Island.
Of course. That's right, yeah.
And so over the years, my sister and brother-in-law spent a lot of time in Mallorca, and I have as well, along with my parents. So it's an place which is a very happy memories for us all. So we thought it was a nice place to go and help sort of cheer them up a bit. And it was good, but it was strange being on holiday again with just my siblings. 5 of us, no partners, no kids, just the original famous 5.
Did you fight and argue all the time, like siblings normally do?
We had one fight.
Did you really?
Which I thought was, for the way things used to be back in the day, was quite good going, really. After 40 years to all go away together again and to only have one sort of falling out at the airport, I thought it was all right.
That's brave, isn't it? Because your brother is a soldier, isn't he? So you're brave picking a fight with him.
Yeah, well, you can only take so much family, as everybody knows. But otherwise all good, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, on behalf
I am going out the country. I'm going to put
bloody hell.
I might as well put my cards on the table now. I am going out the country again next month. But this is a refereeing holiday, so I'm off to referee at what's sort of referred to basically as the Gay Football World Cup, which is taking place in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires, lovely.
And so myself and a few other people are going out there to referee, and it should be fun because tournament's being hosted by the Argentinian FA. So it should be sort of some nice facilities that will be refereeing in.
Bells and whistles. Fantastic.
Yeah, it should be fun. So
I
there
was
you
just
go.
going to
Any
say,
news? Any news with you?
no, I was just going to say on behalf of all the listeners, we hope your mum is okay. And we hope she's well and your
Thank you
family
very
are
much.
well.
I thought you were going to say, on behalf of the listeners, please be assured that the profits from this podcast are not funding Ed's travels abroad.
Profits? I wish we had
Well,
profits.
I was going to say that we
I know we haven't figured out how to monetize this wonderful little project of ours yet, have we?
It's just been a drain on our resources.
If
Why are we
you
doing
are
this again,
listening
by
and
the
you
way?
could, if you are listening and you could sponsor us, it'd be much appreciated. And I
We've never done an
guarantee,
appeal
and
for sponsors.
I guarantee no penny will fund Edge travel account if you do sponsor the podcast. It'll only go into making the podcast better.
I mean, but whilst you sit and think about it, why have we not asked for a sponsor before? We must be mad. I've got up at 6:45 this morning to record a podcast for a podcast that costs us nothing but money and time, and we haven't made a single penny out of this thing. Just to remind me why we're still going.
It's called passion.
Oh, passion, and our law listeners. To be fair, our law
Exactly. Who keep us going.
They do keep us going. I've got some refereeing football news this week. Adam, do you have any referee football news this week?
No, I don't. No, none. Other than like we spoke a little bit, didn't we, about what was it, 14 yellow cards Anthony Taylor gave out in, was it the Chelsea game?
Yeah. So this is I think this is the sort of main news story of the week. So last weekend, Chelsea played. It was the strange thing was I think it broke records. I think it's the most yellow cards in a Premier League game since the Premier League began. So 14 yellow cards. But the weird thing was, and I said this to you after the game, when I don't think you'd watched the game, but you sort of had seen that there'd been this sort of record. It just wasn't that sort of game. It was very, very bizarre. I mean, I was watching it. It wasn't the most exciting of games. It wasn't, as you might expect from hearing there were 14 yellow cards, an aggressive or violent game. Nor was from a viewer's perspective, anything that suggested that it was problematic and people were causing difficulties to the referee. I think most of it must have been for dissent. Because I think there was a stat afterwards that said something like Chelsea got 8 yellow cards, but had only committed 3 sort of fouls, which were worthy of yellow cards on the pitch. So there was obviously a lot of stuff for dissent. And yeah, it was really peculiar to watch. And if it weren't for the fact that, you know, you're dealing with 2 sort of very professional clubs, it's a sort of case where you might have thought that somebody had said, well, there was some sort of betting scam going on, because what epitomised it for me is João Felix came on with about 10 minutes to go, where Chelsea were 1-0 up, and right in front of the referee, just sort of grabbed a player around the head and like basically threw him to the floor. And it was like in the middle of the pitch, you know, there was no reason for doing it, no advantage to be gained. It almost looked as though someone had done it purely to get a yellow card. You know, you read those stories of people saying, you know, after their career ended, and say, well, I wanted to have Boxing Day off with the family, you know, so I took the yellow card on the match on the 20th, so I was suspended. It was really strange. But the problem is, 2 things to flow from that. One is Chelsea fans and Anthony Taylor, there's this very poor relationship. Chelsea fans simply do not like Anthony Taylor, although he seems to get appointed to us more regularly than other referees. But the sad side of it is he has been taken away from officiating this weekend because of online threats he's received. So the professional body have decided that in light of the sort of threats he's been receiving on social media following last week's game, that he will no longer take part in I think the 2 games he was going to be officiating in this weekend. So once again, that sort of the horrible online and abuse that referees get sort of rears its head again.
Well, he was it was also his family who were targeted and threatened as he was coming through the airport, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was after
a year or 2 ago.
Champions League final, wasn't it? So
well, we wish Anthony Taylor well. We hope he's okay.
I mean, it's obviously not great when it leads to, you know, referees having to be taken away from games because of the abuse they're getting online. But yeah, that's rather sad. I saw there was a story this week about a 84-year-old referee who was finally hanging up his boots in, I think it was Lincolnshire, after sort of over 50 years of refereeing. He decided enough was enough, which I thought was really great. To hear that somebody who was 84 had still been refereeing. I mean, how impressive is that? Let's hope that. Oh, I can't imagine myself refereeing in my 80s. Crikey, I'm struggling in my 50s. Good Lord. I'm just going to give a shout out to the 84-year-old referee because I found his name now. It's Ernie. I mean, Ernie, don't hear that name very often anymore, do you? Ernie Broughton. And he describes a local legend. He says some of his highlights in his extraordinary refereeing career include sending 4 people off in one match. Well, that's quite good going. Appearing in court over a player breaking another's jaw.
Wow.
And being chased around the pitch by an angry defender.
Excellent.
And
We've all been there.
And he says his body is finally called it a day, aged 84. So happy football referee retirement to Ernie.
Good for him.
And the only other story I saw this week was the referee, Argentinian referee, I think it was, who came out and said this week that he had deliberately not given a yellow card to Lionel Messi when he was refereeing a semi-final in the Copa America in Mexico in 2007 because he wanted to get the player's shirt at the end of the game. Which is a fairly embarrassing comment to make. Yeah. So
that's
apparently Messi had got a yellow card in the second half of the game, and it seems that he handled the ball just before the end of the match, and the referee said that he told the referee told Messi, I'm not going to be giving you a yellow card if I get your shirt off the game. Not a great image for the referee world, but there we go.
That is not.
No, so that's all my referee news this week. I think I didn't get anything else.
Excellent. Good
so
stuff.
What are we going to talk about this week, Adam?
Well, as promised, as previewed, and as discussed before, we was going to go through all of the considerations for certain things that are found in the back of the Australian laws of the game book. And
Excellent.
Yeah, so we're going to start off that mini series now today with all the considerations. There's an awful lot of them, so it's going to be quite. It might take as long as it took us to get through the 17 laws, Edward.
So get yourself comfortable, listeners, because here we go again with reading through some more matters. Yeah, go on.
But we think they're going to be really helpful in just helping you get to the center point of what you have to think about when making these decisions. On the introduction of the book, it says it's considerations for match situation analysis, reasons for cautionable offences, sending off offences, and report writing guidelines. They'll assist you to take decisions in the match based on the principles of the laws of the game. So they are really good, thought-provoking questions, and they're the things you need to be thinking about as you're out there refereeing, basically. The first 25 considerations all come down to fouls and misconduct, careless, reckless, using excessive force, and violent conduct. So as we know, that covers yellow cards, red cards,
just before
and just normal fouls.
Go into that. Some listeners recall we made reference on a previous podcast when we were discussing the stopping the quick free kick Declan Rice incident. I posted a few of the sort of pieces around that were on social media, retweeted them, and one of the responses we got from one of our listeners, you might recall, started talking about some criteria as to why they felt it was a yellow card, and the criteria sounded like they were referring to a document like this. He was an English referee, and so I asked a couple of referee friends about, do they know where that comes from? And the answer is, it sounds as though when you get higher up in the refereeing world, you get some. I don't know if it's a document. I suspect it must be a document because they both knew about it when I mentioned it to them. And I'm just trying to track that down. I think there is an English equivalent of this document that exists for referees higher up in the game in the UK. So I'm trying to track it down so that we can do a sort of compare and contrast and see if there's anything significantly different or anything of relevance or use in the English version. But anyway, I think this is a really great document, and there's been a lot of people. We've talked about this document quite a few times, haven't we, over the course of the podcast? And the reason why we wanted to go through it is we've had a lot of people saying to us, can we see it? Can you go through it? And so finally, we're going to do that. It is available finally online, isn't it? So we are going to be
Mm.
able, I think, to post the links to it
On our website.
on our
Yeah.
website.
And
Which
also, like, this was a surprise to me. So when I first, bit of background here, when I first got to Queensland, a lot of we was talking about decisions with referees, and it was just in the referee community as you were, and they're always talking about, what are your considerations? What are your considerations? What are your considerations? And they were always coming back to these things. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? No one's ever spoken to me about the considerations in order to get to a decision for this, right? Obviously, like, we kind of know, like, an excessive force tackle has the player jumped? Has he got control of his body, etc., etc., etc. Those kinds of considerations I was aware of, but they were talking about them as if they were like the Ten Commandments, like written on a tableau somewhere. And yeah, and so I just kept investigating, and then I finally found them. And so I was just at sea like you guys were, which is why I thought it'd be a really good idea to cover them in the podcast. So yeah. So should we start
I,
with fouls and misconduct?
yeah, I was just going to say we should preface it by saying that the version of the document that we're looking at is one which is dealing with the laws of the game from 2016 to
Yeah.
2017. I say that just in case we trespass upon anything for which there's been a law change. I don't think on the substantive things that this document deals with there's been any law changes, but if we think of any as we go
Mm,
through, we'll
mm,
obviously flag them up. And it looks as though this document, Adam, might also be something which is made available to referees higher up, although
mm.
from what you just said
Well,
there,
it's
it
made
seems that
available to everyone because it's, well, on
right.
this part in the AFC, which is the Asian Football Confederation. It's made
Yeah.
available to everyone because it's in the back of their laws books.
Right. Okay. There we go.
Mm.
Yeah. Let's deal with chapter 1, which, as you say, is fouls and misconduct. Yeah. And there's 25. Let's run through them.
So, question one, or consideration one, they are all kind of posed as questions, which is obviously what you're going to have to be thinking about when you're refereeing. Does the player show a lack of attention or consideration when making the challenge? Pretty
No,
straightforward, isn't it?
it is pretty straightforward. I mean, the thing is that this topic does provoke a lot of our sort of correspondence from listeners, because we all have in our head what we think is sort of careless, reckless, and excessive force. And I think for me, I find the concept quite easy because they've got some, I mean, these are laws, and that sort of terminology is used in legal language with which I'm obviously familiar. So for me, as a concept, I don't have a difficulty sort of applying them. But I understand why for a lot of people, um, they do sort of have difficulty to work out what is the line between careless, reckless, and excessive. I think it's easy at the two extremes.
Mm.
Um, it's often not quite so easy in the
Between
middle. But
careless and reckless, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a good starting point, as to whether or not a player is showing a lack of attention or consideration,
Hmm.
because that is obviously going to what you're.
Well, that denotes it's a foul, right? That just tells you, okay, if the player is showing a lack of attention or consideration, then I've got a foul. So that's like the first question: is it a foul? So that's how we answer that.
And also, I think that is a factor which you might want to take into account when you're assessing quite how serious you think it is, because there is obviously a very big difference between somebody that goes into a challenge and you form the view they've gone in there to sort of cause somebody harm, or their intention
Mm,
is to deliberately foul somebody. There's a very big difference between that sort of situation, and as often happens at the grassroots level of the game, where it's a foul's been committed due to a lack of
mm,
skill, or a lack of attention,
mm.
or consideration. So I think that is quite a useful indicator. Number 2, does the player act without precaution when making the challenge? Anything
Without
want to say about that?
precaution. That's an interesting word,
Yeah.
isn't it? Precaution.
Yeah, I mean, it kind
Without
of almost,
precaution.
I mean, it's kind of, isn't it kind of the flip side of consideration number 1, really? I mean,
Mm,
if you're paying attention, then you're not acting without precaution,
mm,
and if you're not paying attention, then you're doing the
mm.
opposite. But
When I think of that, when I think about precaution, I'm thinking like, how's the player's body language in the build up to the challenge? How are they behaving? Like, what indications do you have before the actual challenge takes place in order to maybe put you on high alert that a foul might be coming? So there's probably like a primer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, For me, it's almost again trying to form this assessment about. I'm going to sound a bit legalistic here, I'm afraid, but it's almost as though it's about a question about trying to assess someone's intent. I think you can tell the difference between somebody that is being entirely reckless and not thinking about what they're about to do, as opposed to somebody who you can almost sense are alive to what the risks might be, and that kind of affects how they go into a challenge. But I think the next one, number 3, is for me is a really important one, because this is a real big issue with this sort of we got the ball and all some nonsense. Number 3, does the player make fair or unfair contact with the opponent after touching the ball? Because there's a misconception, particularly amongst players and some fans, that provided you get the ball and your contact with the ball happens, that there can be no sanction that can follow for anything that happens after that. And of course, that's simply not right. Someone's tackle is a continuing action. It doesn't stop just because they've got the ball with the sort of tip of their foot and cleared it away.
That's a really good point.
And so, you've got to kind of work out whether that contact that takes place after the ball's been touched is fair or unfair. And I think this is a judgment call, which is not always easy to make. But sometimes there is a bit of accidental contact that takes place after a challenge has taken place, and that's just sort of the what happens in physical contact sport. But in other occasions, sometimes I think you can tell there's been a sort of deliberate attempt by the player who's making the challenge to not only get the ball, but make sure that the player goes down with it, so they're not going to be able to sort of challenge for it again.
With that, you always need to just remember, is it a push, is it a pull, is it a trip, is it a kick, is it, all of those things that denote a foul. Even if they've won the ball, have they done that after? And if they have, then it's a foul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Cool. Does the player act with, so what number is this, 4? Does the player act with disregard to the danger for the opponent?
Well, I think this is, a lot of these points are kind of variations on the same, aren't they? Because, this is really the same as, are they acts without precaution? It is, I suppose the only thing that's different between number 2 consideration, number 4, is that they're now talking about danger. And again, I think for me, I think it's fairly obvious when someone does a challenge and they have absolutely no regard at all to the consequences of what they're doing. It's usually that sort of situation where you've seen a player who's aggrieved because they just got dispossessed, or they thought they'd just been fouled but didn't get a foul, and you can see they start running about like a headless chicken, head down, and what's coming. There's a foul coming because they're so angry. And then, those are sort of situations where I try and sort of have a quick word in the player's ear, but often you can't do that because it happens so quickly after them being aggrieved, and there's no stopping play. You can't actually stop it. But those are the ones where you kind of can see then that they're sort of launching into challenge. They've got absolutely no intention of getting the ball, and if they get the ball, it's just a bonus. Their sole intention is just to cause difficulties for the actual other player and commit a foul. But I think those sort of situations are fairly clear. Number 6, does the player have a chance of playing the ball in a fair manner? I think that's a really good point.
Wait, we didn't do 5. Hang on, we didn't do 5. Can't keep counted. Does the player act, number 5 is, does the player act with disregard to consequences for the opponent? Which is very similar to everything else, right?
Yeah.
Are you just behaving in a way that you just don't care what happens to anyone who's involved in the way you're behaving, right? You have to bear in mind that, everyone is entitled to their position on the pitch. And if your behavior is affecting that unfairly, then it's probably a foul. Then on to number 6.
Does the player have a chance of playing the ball in a fair manner? That's a really useful consideration, I think, as well, because, if a player you think is generally trying to get a ball that they have a legitimate chance of getting, I think that does affect as to what the sanctions might be for any foul that follows. Whereas it's a lot easier for you if you think that the player had absolutely no chance of getting the ball, is launched into to make a challenge, and that sort of clarifies the issue for you as well as to what the sanction might be. But I think that's a really, really Good point. Did they have a fair chance of actually getting the
Introducing
ball
that
or
word
not?
chance really puts you in the moment, doesn't it? It really makes you
Yeah.
like consider like, oh my goodness, like that, because that chance is going to change instantaneously in the moment.
But it's funny, just reading these out. I don't know
Mm.
about you, but as I'm reading that, I'm kind of visualizing in
Yeah,
my
you do.
head
Yeah. Like with
sort
that
of
one,
the
I'm
sort of
thinking of
challenge
like,
you're talking
yeah,
about.
I'm thinking of a guy through on goal and a centre back chasing him down. And has he got a chance of
Yeah.
making that tackle at all? No. Has he got a chance of getting round and getting in front for that ball? No. So why has he made the tackle in the first place?
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
only going to get
Or,
the player.
the player who you can see is sort of catching the defender, and you think to yourself, oh crikey, is he actually going to
Mm,
make it? And
mm.
he goes to make the challenge. It looks as though he might have had a chance of getting it, but just didn't quite get there, as opposed to sort of the clearer cut cases where
Just just on
it's
that,
not
Ed,
going to be a ball that
just
they're
on
going to
that, I
get
think you're
with a
probably the
player.
only referee in the world who thinks, oh crikey, as he is refereeing. Number 7. Does the challenge put the opponent in a dangerous situation?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of these are, as we've said already, slight variations on the same thing.
Mm.
But I think that is kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, I
I
think it
mean, it's
does.
all
I think a lot of
that
them do, but they're still important things to just be aware of, I think, as you're judging this. And
yeah,
number 8, does the player touch the ball after making contact with the opponent? Obviously, if you're not touching the ball, then you've got no chance, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Number 9, does the player use excessive force and endanger the safety of the opponent? And I think uh, we all got our own assessment as to sort of what is legitimate use of force in tackling and challenging somebody. Uh, but you've got to then form that assessment, and it's often in the heat of the moment, as to whether or
Mm.
not they've gone too far
Mm.
and endanger the safety of the opponent. So, yeah, number 10.
I think just on that, like, sorry, just quickly, like they've used the words excessive force and endanger the safety in the first, like this is the first time they've brought in like red card considerations, and that's basically the first thing you need to judge. Does that challenge endanger the safety? The second you think somebody's safety is in danger, you're probably looking at an excessive force challenge. Like those two have to be prime in your head in that
Yeah,
moment, to make sure you're getting that red card decision right.
yeah, good point. Number 10, does the player use brutality against the opponent when challenging for the ball? Well, I mean, I think that again is a variation of the one we just done, which is
What would the
excessive force
What
and
would the definition of brutality be, though? Would that be
um
like striking? Would it be like punching,
for
elbowing?
me that's where your intention of physical contact is nothing at all to do with the football.
Right.
It's
Mm,
sort of your it conjures up in my mind the image of somebody that's just basically hitting somebody,
mm.
whether that be with their hand, head, or
For
foot.
no
But
reason at all. Yeah.
it's about violence as opposed to trying to play the game of football.
It's quite an
Is sort
evocative
of
word, isn't it?
yeah.
Brutality. Yeah.
But I think that I mean it is evocative, but it's also quite useful because
It's very
if you
useful.
come to the conclusion that that was just a brutal challenge,
Mm,
then what you're really saying is that they
it's a red
have
card.
yeah, they're playing in a dangerous fashion, and
It's
it's a
serious
red
foul play.
card.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Does the challenge, this is number 11. Oh, no, we've done that, haven't we? Hang on. No, we
yeah,
haven't.
we don't
Does
know,
the
have
challenge
we?
endanger
Oh
the
yeah,
safety of the opponent? That's very similar to the one before, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a difference between endanger the safety of the opponent and an element of brutality, but
Mm,
it's a narrow margin, isn't it? Really.
mm,
Um, Number 12. I think this is a really important one. What degree of speed and/or intensity is the player using when making the challenge? Kind of, we've already touched upon that already, which is there's a difference, as you say, between someone who's sort of chasing back after a player, and it's just about they make the challenge, and it's sort of close 50-50 is whether they're going to make it or not. That's one
mm,
thing. But you got a player who's like nowhere near it, and putting in a challenge,
mm.
it's different.
And also with
Um,
that, like speed, higher speed equals darker color, right? Like
yeah,
the more speed and or intensity is increasing, the more likelihood that you're going to be looking at red cards as opposed to yellow cards, as opposed to careless.
yeah. I mean, if you do something, with intensity and speed,
Mm,
you're increasing the risk that it's going to be more reckless than careless.
Well, you're also
Because
increasing the risk of endangering the safety of someone, right?
yeah,
Whenever you go
absolutely,
at
yeah,
someone,
yeah.
so that kind of once you introduce speed into it as well, you're kind of ticking off all those other considerations before straight away, because you could be using an act of brutality. It's very hard to be brutal in a slow manner, I would imagine. You don't exactly see AJ delivering a punch at like in slow motion.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. When you engage in a challenge at speed with intensity, I think as a player, you need to acknowledge the fact that you increase your risk
Of fouling.
of yeah
Mm.
of fouling. Number 13, does the player show clear malice when making the challenge? Well, that's the sort of thing you can pick up from sort of body language and sort of behavior. And the example I gave is that sort of player who's feeling aggrieved for having just been challenged, he thinks unfairly, and they're
I
sort of chasing
suppose
after another
that's the
player.
closest. That's the closest in all of these considerations they get to in using the word intention, isn't it? Malice.
Yeah, it's
The
funny,
word
isn't it? Because
intention doesn't exist at all, and they're looking at it in terms of malice, which is slightly more malicious, isn't it? Like it's slightly more underhanded rather than intent,
yeah, I don't know why they're shying away though from using the word intent,
because
because
you can't
intent
read somebody's
is,
mind.
well, no, you can't read somebody's mind, but in the same way that lots of criminal offences, there's an element of intention to it, right?
But you have to
And
prove that with
we,
evidence, don't you?
yeah, but the whole point is, right? The point you just made is, how do you understand intent can't see inside someone's head? Well, that is the case for all offences. Okay, but what juries are told to do is to look at all the surrounding evidence and circumstances
Mm.
to help you form your view as to what the person's intention was. There's nothing complicated about that. We all understand what intention means. You see a kid do something and they throw something, we can see what they meant to do. You can't see inside their head, but you form that assessment because the child was really, really angry that just been told off, that's been told they couldn't go anywhere, and the response was they throw their food on the floor, right? We understand the concept, but I just don't understand why they're shying away just from using a word which is used very, very regularly.
Was that
Intention.
was that an insight into the argument you had with your siblings on holiday?
No, there's no food throwing.
I get
We're
it.
not quite at those levels.
I think intention. I think the reason is because it takes away the idea of it not being a deliberate act. If you go, "Oh, I didn't intend to do it," then you're like, "Okay, well, I'll let you off the hook because you didn't mean to do it, but you still did it."
Yeah, but that then goes to your assessment of intention. Then goes to sort of what the sanction is, really, doesn't it? Because if you take the view that someone's committed a foul, but you're satisfied there was no intent to endanger the other player, then they've been reckless, haven't they? I mean, that's
No,
the whole
because
point.
have they either have endangered the safety or they haven't. Like it's a binary thing.
I still think there's no difficulty in using the word intention. I mean, in legal language, which we try to kind of keep simple for juries, it's just a word we use, and very rarely do juries need any help in sort of assessing that. And if they do, the directions they get are, as I say, are on the lines of, well, you determine that by looking at what the person's actions were immediately before, at the time of, and after the incident, what they said about it, look at all the surrounding circumstances, and that's just common sense. I don't think I think that's something we all do automatically.
Yeah, but I
But
don't think
it's
you
just
don't get
strange that they shy away from it here.
on the football field, you don't get the opportunity to look at it in that much detail, do you? Like you might have missed it, or you might have only seen half of it, or you might have only seen the consequence, not the build up, or you might have only seen what happened after, not like and if you went on what they said about it, they're always going to say, "I didn't intend to do it," and you're like, well, if we brought in the word intention, everyone would then use that as a way out of getting sanctioned for a tackle. I think there must be a reason they don't use it, because they don't use it anywhere, and there must be a reason for it. And my understanding has always been we can't read people's minds, and we just have to judge literally on the physical thing that we see.
But in asking that question, does the player show clear malice when making the challenge? You are asking people to do exactly that. I mean,
Mm,
that's the exact same question.
I mean,
Just not using the word intention,
out of the two
which
of us,
is,
this is in your wheelhouse. I mean, I don't know. It's just my
yeah.
my assumptions on it, and just the way I've always trained referees with it, and the way I've always thought about it myself. I just take intention out of it. because I think it muddies the water. And also,
Yeah.
you can't believe players all the time, right?
No. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you would, because a player said to you after a challenge, "Oh, I didn't mean to do it, ref," that you suddenly go,
Mm.
"Oh, okay, fine, it's only a yellow." I didn't mean by that, but it's the other factors that you can assess is the sort of how they go into the challenge, what their demeanor's been throughout the course of the game. You know, it's unusual that a player who's been, you know, playing by the rules, not causing any difficulties, acting fairly throughout the game, not being involved in any sort of reckless, dangerous challenges, would suddenly intentionally then commit a sort of really nasty foul. I mean, it happens, but
It
it's
does. It
rare.
happen. It does happen. It is rare,
It
and
does
I
happen, but
think
it's
you've answered
rare.
your own question there. Yeah.
But the point is that, you know, I think you can form a view about someone, what someone's intentions were, by having watched them throughout the course of the rest of the game. Um, I don't know. I don't know why there must be some cogent reason as to why they're shying away from
Mm.
the use of the word intention, because they
Hmm.
obviously are. But I hope that everybody understands what uh, is meant by malice. I mean, malice really is when someone sort of intent is wanting to do harm, and they're being a bit reckless about it as well, whether or not they're going to cause harm. But there we go. Number 4D, does the player lunge on the opponent from the front, from the side, or from behind? I kind of struggle with this one, Adam, because there is nothing in the laws of the game that say you can't do any of those things,
No,
right?
what they're getting at is the fact it's a lunge. I think the direction is irrelevant. I think what they're saying is if the player's lunged from the front, if the player's lunged from the back, if the player's lunged from the side, that's a high consideration for a foul. It's not if he's lunged from the front or if they've lunged from the front, it's okay. That I think that's what they're getting at
Yeah.
here.
Well, I mean, that's what I thought as well, which is why I get to understand why the question isn't was the player lunging on the opponent, because
Mm.
by distinguishing between front, side, and back, it's almost as though saying there's something illegitimate about tackling from behind, which is another misconception amongst players. Which, oh, we took tackle from behind. Well, yeah, you can tackle from behind.
Mm.
It all depends how you tackle from behind. That's important.
Yeah, and if it's a
Um,
lunge, then you're not allowed to do it, right?
yeah, I mean, if you're lunging, then there's a number of factors there. First of all, you're kind of at your limit, so your ability to control yourself is obviously reduced. You're enhancing the risk in lunging, then of sort of, you know, hurting
Mhm.
somebody or not getting the ball. But yeah, I was just curious as to why they felt the necessity to sort of. It's
Put in
almost
the
as though making
directions.
out as though there was a difference between
Yeah.
a lunge from behind,
Mm.
which I don't think there is, and a lunge from the front. I
No,
think, as you're right, I think it
I
is all
think the
about.
word that you need to focus on there is lunge.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Number 15. Which part of the body has the player used to make contact? Bottom of the foot, top of
Yeah,
the
I think
foot.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a good consideration, because a player who's in control of themselves, who is challenging properly for the ball, is almost certainly going to be making contact with the foot, and there might be some contact, for example, with the lower part of their leg. Whereas people, for example, making contact with the knee or their own knee or higher up another person's body, I think is sort of a good factor to take
Hmm.
into account.
Also, like you can
Uh,
charge with the shoulder, right? If you're shoulder to shoulder,
yeah,
so that's okay, so it's
yeah.
always important to look at. Number 16. Does
Although
the po-
we could have a whole episode about what is and isn't a legitimate shoulder to shoulder challenge, Adam.
Yeah, I think that'd be very hard to do audibly.
Yeah, it would be interesting though, because that
Um,
is.
Number 16. Does the player use studs when making a tackle?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a common sense point, isn't it? I
So you're
mean,
not allowed to
there
use
is,
studs. There you go.
um, you know,
Hmm.
if you're going in with your foot raised, you're in for difficulties, I would have thought.
Of course.
Um, 17, on which part of the opponent's body is contact made? Well, that's kind of the converse of what we just dealt with in number
Hmm.
15 about parts of the body where
Shoulders. Yeah.
you're making contact. Yeah, as I say, if you're sort of accidental contact with the lower part of the leg as you do a challenge, that's one thing. But if you're sort of
Mm.
going in and you're hitting them sort of in their stomach or chest with your leg, then that's entirely another. Um, 18, in which direction are the tackler's feet pointing?
I think
I
that's
couldn't
one of the most useful
understand
ones.
this.
Oh, do you not? I
I
think it's
couldn't
one of the most.
understand
I
this.
think it's one of the most useful ones out of all the 25. Because if you're seeing a tackle happen and you see a foot that is toes pointed into the floor, then that reduces the idea that that player is not endangering the safety of the opponent. If their toes are pointing up, then they are likely to endanger because they're showing the full force of their leg. And also, if your toes are down, you're more likely to have a bent knee. Whereas if your toes are up, you're more likely to have an extended hamstring, an extended knee, and therefore you're now using a solid leg almost as a weapon. Like it's much there's no give in that leg. If your toes are pointing up, your whole leg is tense. Whereas if your toes are down, you've got much more flexibility through the knee because of the way your quadriceps and hamstrings work. So it's also, if you see one thing in a tackle and you're not sure, but you can see the toes are pointing up, chances are it's a foul. It's, you're looking at probably quite a high level of a foul. Even if everything else doesn't look that well, if that's the only bit you see, then you've got your answer. That's why it's there.
Okay, fair enough. That's a valid point. Number 19, does the player challenge the ball at the moment the contact is made? I think that's quite a good consideration as to, whether the contact that's taking place is, clearly before they've made contact with the ball or clearly after they've made contact with the ball.
How many times do you see a player take someone out from behind and they take all of the legs and then they get up and go, I got the ball, ref. It's like, I'd have got the ball in that situation because I'd have got rid of the player as well.
I mean, it happens so often.
No,
and yet you find yourself saying that
I know
every single game, if not once, at least once.
Yep.
It's mad, isn't it? They're sort of, they've taken the complete legs away so that the player that they're tackling has got no ability to play the ball anyway. And then they say, well, I managed to sweep the ball away. Look, we've got possession. I mean, it's maddening. But there we go. Number 20. Does the player charge the opponent in a fair manner? Well, we kind of touched upon that already. You are entitled to have shoulder-to-shoulder contact when you are within proximity of the ball. That's quite important, though. People seem to think, this is why I said you could have a whole episode of this. People seem to think that shoulder-to-shoulder contact is legitimate, full stop.
Yeah.
And, and they think, well, all I did was, he was towards the ball, and all I've done is sort of shoulder barged him. Well, the whole point is it is an infringement unless you are sort of proximate to the ball.
Well, I think the law on that is the ball has to be within a playable area, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was just using the word proximate, added a bit posh. That was all.
Sorry. We weren't all. We didn't all go to Oxford. My
next
friend.
Consideration. Not did I. Does the player do you consider the foul an act of violent conduct or serious foul play? I mean, what is the line that's being drawn here?
Well, I think it's just, is it violent? Is it serious foul play? That just helps you determine it's a red card, right? Like, I think the point is if you think it's either, it doesn't matter, it's still a red card. Like, I often think whenever someone says to me, he kicked him really hard, like, is it violent conduct or is it serious foul play? I'm always like, it doesn't matter too much.
Well, that's why I can understand the question.
What it matters with, why it's important to determine between the two as a referee, is because it will have an impact on the disciplinary process on the other side. So a player is more likely to get a longer suspension for violent conduct than they are for serious foul play. Because if it's serious foul play, it's deemed in relation to football, whereas if it's violent conduct, it's deemed not in relation to football, and therefore a player is probably more likely to be suspended for longer for it. So, like, no one expects someone to punch someone on the pitch, which is violent conduct, where serious foul play directly relates to a footballing incident still. Do you see? I think that's why they're just asking you to judge that a little bit closer if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I was misinterpreting that because I was kind of thinking, well, hold on, they're both red cards. So what is the problem? But you're right. You're talking about sort of what the consequences might be in how you classify it, which is a valid point. Number 22, has a challenge been committed in a fair manner or a careless manner? Well, I mean, I think that's
kind of relates to everything else, doesn't it?
An instinctive assessment you make of every single challenge on the football pitch, really, don't you? Number 23, does the player use the arm as a tool or a weapon?
Do you know how to determine this?
Well, in my head, I do. I wouldn't necessarily, not necessarily sure how I'd verbalize it, but I mean, is there?
Sorry, I was just saying the easiest way to determine whether an arm has been used as a tool to help balance a player or for a player's ability to to play football, or as a weapon, is whether they've got an open hand or a closed fist.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily definitive, but I can understand why that'd be a factor you'd take into account.
It's a good guide though, right?
No, I'm saying I agree. It's probably is a good indicative factor. But yeah, I mean, it's just I think we've all got an image in our head of sort of how a player is, trying to shield themselves a bit, sort of arms out by their sides a little bit, and that's legitimate. The difference is when you're then using the elbow, effectively to cause injury or deliberately make contact with another player unnecessarily. It's not part of your body shape or natural body shape of playing the ball. Number
24.
24. Does the player challenge the ball in a fair manner? Well, I mean, kind of that's the whole.
It's a bit repetitive now, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's like I'm sort of thinking whoever was sitting down writing this, they got to about number 18 and thought, "Oh God, I've already posed the same question about 7 times already." I don't know. I mean, crikey, I don't know how they come up with this many. And then finally, does the player attempt to use excessive force or brutality against an opponent when not challenging for the ball? Well, I mean, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? I mean, if they're not challenging for the ball, you're in fairly difficult territory anyway, because there's unlikely to be anything you're going to do in terms of the use of force, which is going to be in any way legitimate. But there we go. Yeah. So
that's it.
Chapter 1. There are a whole load of other chapters which we're going to go through, but I think that's probably enough for week 1 of our analysis of match situations. I forgot to tell you news, Adam. I, as we all know, I was a guest of the Raw Box at Wembley for the
it's not like you haven't mentioned it.
You wait all these years, Adam, for an invite to be a guest of the Raw Box, and it's a bit like London buses.
They come 2 at once today.
I got a second one.
Really?
And I was at the England-Denmark game in the Raw Box.
Amazing.
Again.
Fantastic.
This time I was a guest of my brother, who was there. So
was this before you had a fight or after?
Oh, this is before we had a fight. It was the night before we went away. I'm not sure I got the invite after the game, if I'm honest. Off the holiday, rather. But it was very, very nice. He was then in his capacity as being the former chair of the Naval FA, and and he was a guest of the chief exec of the FA, which was nice.
Fantastic.
And I was his guest, so it was lovely. Right, I've got to go to work, Adam.
You do, my friend. Well, you have a lovely day, won't you?
I will do, yeah, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And,
I shall.
We'll chat again soon.
I can't wait. You look after yourself, my friend. See you later.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you so much for making it to the end of another episode of Red or Yellow. You're clearly a very fit listener. May I gently remind you to like and subscribe to this podcast in your podcast app. That way, when we release a new episode, our meandering chats will magically appear on your phone. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with one of your friends when they ask for a podcast recommendation. Word of mouth goes a long way, and no more so than yours. Don't forget, you can get 10% off any refereeing equipment that you might need if you head to processports.com and use the code RedOrYellow10 at checkout. Thank you so much for listening this week. And don't forget to follow us on social media. It's at Red or Yellow Pod. And please feel free to send us any questions that you may have via DM, or you can email redoryellowpod@gmail.com. We cannot wait to speak to you again very, very soon. Ciao, ciao.